Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And my guest on this episode is CRM industry analyst Paul Greenberg. If you work in the CRM space, hopefully you already know Paul as a leading thinker around CRM technology and business strategy. He recently published a new book, The Commonwealth of Self-Interest, Business Success Through Customer Engagement. It explores the demands of 21st century customers and how companies must evolve to meet their expectations. Paul is also known for his seminal book, CRM at the Speed of Light, which has gone through multiple editions in years past. In his role as an analyst and advisor, Paul has worked with most of the big names in the CRM space over the years, including long relationships with leaders at Microsoft, Salesforce, and other well-known firms. He also provides lots of commentary to the rest of us about what he learns. He has a very engaging and candid writing style, and he's really fun to read. Most recently, he launched his 29 CRM watch list, an annual series of articles highlighting the top vendors of the year based on a range of factors from vision to product execution to leadership and philanthropy. Microsoft is in the mix on that list once again this year, so we discuss the Dynamics 365 and Power Platform vision, some of the key themes in the new book, and whether some of the latest trends in the CRM space have staying power. This episode of the MSDW podcast is sponsored by ClickLearn. ClickLearn is the market-leading solution for creating user instructions, e-learning, and process videos for business software. ClickLearn will automate writing your business-critical walkthroughs, saving you 80% of the time you now spend creating them manually for Dynamics 365 Business Central, Finance and Operations, Customer Engagement, and most of your other IT systems. The ClickLearn solution produces your walkthroughs in 8 different formats from a single source, including written documentation, hands-on labs, videos with automated effects, and voiceover. On top of that, ClickLearn has a virtual assistant that guides the users within the live system. Simply record your work process in Dynamics. With one click, ClickLearn produces your walkthroughs in all formats and in more than 45 languages and 135 dialects. It creates a complete e-learning portal with full tracking and scoring, and upgrades your work instructions as you upgrade your Dynamics platform with no manual effort on your part. Hey, Paul Greenberg, welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure, man. I like working with you.
Likewise, and I think last time we talked, you had mentioned that you were in the midst of writing a new book, and in the meantime, it has now been released. So congratulations on that. I know those are always a huge amount of work, and this one is a really big work. I've been reading it and enjoying it.
Thanks. I'll put it this way. It's actually half the size of the last CRM at Speed of Light I did, but by far the hardest book I ever wrote. And it's so difficult. Most of the time, and I don't want to discourage budding authors here, but it was driving me nuts. But the net was, I learned a lot. I hopefully will help people learn a lot also on customer engagement. So it may be worth all the torture.
Yeah, I mean it is a pretty sizable work. I mean, you go deep on and really break down a lot of details and a lot of areas that you typically think about. Well, I mean, you start to, and maybe we should talk about what's the title of it is the Commonwealth of Self-Interest,
Right.
And it's a term that I'd heard you mention because I knew you were thinking about it, but maybe you could explain sort of what that concept is. And I know you spent a lot of time really breaking it down in the book, but can you, for people who haven't heard of it before, what do you mean by that?
Well, look, it starts really from sort of a really fundamental human premise, which is you got 7.5 billion people on the planet, and there's literally only one thing that all of us have in common, which is we all want to be happy. And while we're on the planet trying to be happy, on our journey to that, we want to be happy, right? We don't want to be miserable on a journey of happiness, right? So, and we spend our life effectively one way or the other, depending on what it is that makes us happy, trying to be happy, right? That's what we want out of life, is to have a life that we can look back and say, really, not just I really enjoyed it, but I really treasured it, right? That's the better way to look at it. Now, that said, of that 7.5 billion people, there's probably not even 2 who have common journeys, right? So everyone has a different journey. Now, that's where self-interest gets defined, right? And the idea of self-interest is not selfishness, which is different. The self-interest is defined by I as an individual am looking for my path to happiness, and then on that path to happiness, I'd like to have as much control over my choices as is actually possible, right? And those choices, I mean, the control over choices is not 100% possible, because if it was, you'd be interfering with everyone else's journey, which would make it a very bad thing. But it's somewhat possible. Now, if you're a business, you're both your let's call it your opportunity, and your absolute problem is that you have to figure out what it is that makes your customers happy in order to keep them. Because look, from the very beginning, from the day I wrote the first word on CRM I ever wrote, the day I consulted with a first company I ever consulted with, the day I ever implemented a CRM system, any of those things, the one premise that's always governed what I said was very fundamental and simple when it came to customers themselves, which was, if a customer likes you and continues to like you, they'll continue to do business with you. If they don't, they won't. And it's literally that simple. It's complex to execute, but the principle couldn't be any simpler. And how is it that you as a business are going to get those customers to like you? And now, at one point in history, back when we started all this, it was mostly you had to have effective products and services, right? And that would do it. That no longer does it, right? You still have to have that, but now you have to have kind of an experiential focus, which means you have to you have to be able to provide the kind of engagement that leads to a overarching great customer experience, or at least a good one, or at least let's call it a sufficient one, that makes the customer want to continue to engage with you. And then the other thing you have to provide, so you have to provide kind of that, and consumable experiences, meaning things that the customer gets from you, can do with you, that even they can provide for you, but that makes them feel good, that are beyond just the products and services. And the other thing you have to provide, and this is where control of choice comes in, is tools. A good example of that, and a historic one, has always been Disney destinations, which, anything you can say about Disney, it's A, built on experiences, and B, a very data-driven company, right? And many years ago, they had a Disney Destinations, which is their vacation arm, was suffering from kind of a lag in their revenue, and they were looking at it, and they found out the problem was the complexity of vacations and the inability of the people planning the vacations to get anything done unless it took hours and hours and hours consistently of their time, and they were dealing with travel agents all the time to try to figure it out, and it was costly and it was confusing. So Disney's trying to figure out, well, what do we do about that? Well, we have to take out some of the pain, so to speak, some of the friction, and we have to make it easier on the customer to actually plan a vacation, because by the time they were done with a typical Disney plan for destination vacation, they needed a second vacation. So, what they did was they just did online tools, and they said, all right, you know what? Come online, figure out what you want. If you can't figure out one session, save it, come back. By that time, 2 or 3 things will happen. One is we'll see what you're interested in so far, and we'll be able to make some recommendations. And 2 is if there's a price change for the better or the worse, we can let you know that immediately when you come back in. And then you can go on and do it a second time, and a third time, and a fifth time, if that's what you want. And then you finish out your vacation, click, 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 you're done, and you got a vacation. Now, needless to say, Disney saw huge benefits by doing that. And there was one thing that was fundamentally the most important single thing in all the things I just described when it came to choice, which was the save button. The very fact you could interrupt it midstream at your own doing and come back to it whenever you wanted was huge, because it took a lot of the stress right out of the whole thing. You didn't have to stand there and compete with the travel agent trying to sell you more things and confusion. You just control the choice. And that was critical. That's what we're talking about when self-interest is governed. Now, the question is for a business, okay, well, that's great. And if we can find out what we can do to help a customer feel valued and to feel like they have control of their choice and to provide them with things that seem to be useful to them and to make them at least reasonably happy. Well, we got 10 million customers or we got 100 million customers and each one of them wants something else. How the hell do we do that? Well, that's where data comes in, and we have, and not just data, but analytics and more fundamental than anything, insight, and the interesting thing is historically, we had demographic data, we had transactional data, and that's what we had. I'm Paul Greenberg. I spent this much going to Yankee games in 2016 or 2010, and we go back a little further, 2010, and I don't anymore, of course, but I live on Long Island, let's say. But you know what? If you take out the amount I spent on that one, and you look at the New York phone book, there's probably 1,000 people with my name who did exactly the same thing and also live on Long Island. Maybe not at my address, but they live on Long Island. So you're not learning that much from me as Paul Greenberg, the one who lives at this particular address on Long Island. You're simply learning I'm one of the Paul Greenbergs. Now we have all that social data, right? We have tons of historically we called it unstructured. Every 2 months we have some new name for it, but ultimately data that's more right-brained than it is left-brained. It's not numbers, it's how I live. It's my behavior. We can identify my behavior. So what happens when you do that? So you take all that self-interested activity that's going on, and you're tracking my journey through this and this, and you're tracking 100 million people's journey, and a few things emerge. When you're looking at all the social data and tracking all the journeys and looking at demographic data and looking at transactional data, that, oh, you know what? If we provide these 33 items, we can actually satisfy at least partially of that 100 million customers, 78 million of them. And you know what? If we add these other 8, we can probably satisfy another 15 million. At least 7 we're never going to satisfy, but 93 million of these customers will have something that they can find in that basket that they will find both personal to them and useful to them and valuable to them. And thus they will feel valued because they'll feel it's personalized. Now, notice I keep using the word feel, and that is literally the word, right? So that's where Commonwealth comes in, right? You're identifying the things that provide the greatest amount of opportunity for individualized self-interest that you can identify as a company. So the Commonwealth of Self-Interest said, yeah, I'm an individual, but you as a company are providing with choices that make me feel valued by you, even though you don't actually know me as much as I would like to think you do, right? And then I'm happy, you're happy, business happy, business company happy, they get transaction, I get happy, I feel valued, and we're all going to town. And that's the Commonwealth of Self-Interest in a very long-winded way.
You feel good, I feel good. We can all move ahead together, feeling good.
Feeling right. And that, again, if a customer likes you and continues to like you, they'll continue to do business with you. If they don't, they won't.
Right. And I mean, one of the real puzzles, being someone who sort of sits in this space thinking about systems a lot, you make the very strong point that it's not all about buying software, whether it's cloud or older fashioned on premises stuff, but it sounds like there is sort of a role for iterating and for using tools that can at least help you analyze, test your suspicions or test your observations or observe more. So it sounds like companies have, or organizations who have customers are sort of straddling this line between not going too heavily into making assumptions, but also needing that insight to really make the right decisions on where to invest further to.
Oh, absolutely. Look, technology is necessary. It's not a nice thing. I mean, there's several levels of it that are necessary. Look, when it comes to, let's say, traditional CRM technologies, that right now that's operational. I mean, the businesses don't run without it. And when it boils down to it, there's a reason why it's the largest business software market in the world, right? And growing exponentially. Well, let's say steadily. I don't want to say exponentially, but it's growing double digits every year. Because it's operationally necessary for your customer-facing departments. But that's just one piece of the technology necessary too, because you also need, look, I mean, when you're dealing with millions of customers, you're not dealing with them one-on-one. I don't care what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who you are. And if you are dealing with them one-on-one, then you are bankrupt because you've hired millions of people, right? So, what you're doing is you need systems of engagement, and you need systems of record, and you can claim them as CDPs if you want. I don't care. That's I find it. I don't find it ridiculous. I find it. Let's say I'm a bit of a skeptic in terms of everyone's claim to be one, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah, so and that's my analyst hat on, right? So when it boils down to it, you need the systems of record of whether they're passive, which is traditional, or active, which is more what the CDP is like. You need a place where all the data is so it can be analyzed and insight can occur, and it needs to be captured, gathered, and crunched and parsed and all those things in close to real time, right, at this point, because customers' expectations are so immediate, when it comes back to getting a result that they need to see. And and as mobile is increasingly the way we do our work and business, it gets even more immediate. And so the tools have to work more quickly and come up with more, let's call it, insightful results. And so technology, because of the scale especially, becomes an absolute necessity at the level of identifying, understanding, and anticipating behavior also. And then providing the customers with the things that they need. It could be, in a business sense, optimized offers, but it could also be, doing something that will prevent them from churning, or it also could be just simply being nice to them at a particular moment, right, along their journey, along their, customer journey. So you have all these, the technology is there for that at scale. It's there already. A lot of companies have it. It's varying quality and varying capability, but they have it.
Mm-hmm.
And but what you can't do, and this is the important thing, is a lot of people, you see a lot of this out in the market too. A lot of companies, these tech companies, are claiming that they are customer experience platforms. They are not customer experience platforms, right? And the reason they are not is because if you're viewing the bigger picture of customer experience, which most of them are, there's one exception to that, which is Microsoft's favorite partner, Adobe. If you're viewing customer experience in the overarching sense, which means it's how a customer feels about a company over time, you realize, well, wait a minute, there's no technology on this planet that can enable how a customer feels. You can't do it. Look, think of it this way. You've heard CRM and systems of record. You've heard customer engagement and systems of engagement. Have you ever heard of a system of experience? Doesn't exist, and it never will either, because you can't enable feelings. What you can do with technology tools, and if you want to claim to be an experience platform, is build experiences. Adobe does that well. They have the Adobe Experience Manager, which used to be nothing more than a digital asset management tool, actually is now a genuine experience builder. You can actually build the experiences, launch experiential marketing campaigns. You can do all kinds of things, but they relate to the idea that Joe Pine put forward in 1999 in his book, The Experience Economy, which of course is becoming a big term again. But you must always understand Joe Pine created it. No vendor did. In 1999, you look at what he's talking about. He's talking about consumable experiences, right? Meaning they're modular, they're created, they're monetized potentially, and they are ephemeral, meaning they come and go, right? And you can pick out any Disney, any American Girl store, things like that. There's a million experiences that are consumable. That you can create, and that there are tools to do. And Adobe has the best tools at the moment for that. And Microsoft I know is tied to that directly, and there are other companies doing it too. But you can't enable when a company claims to be a experience platform, be suspicious.
Okay.
Because if at let's call it this way, best case they're just misnamed. They're probably an engagement platform, which you can do. I mean, engagement can be enabled by technology. In fact, it's most of the time enabled by technology unless it's in person, right? But at worst, they're just being deceptive, right? So, take a lot of care. And when you're dealing with engagement, which I define as the ongoing interaction between company and customer, offered by the company, chosen by the customer, that's driven, well, it's not driven, it's fully enabled by technology 99 out of 100 times because of what I said. Unless you have a one-to-one in-person conversation, pretty much it's being done over a system of some kind, right? So the communication, the capture of data, all of that stuff is a system of engagement, it is technology. So there's a huge role for technology to play in making your customers like you even more, right? And continue to work with you.
I mean, you mentioned Adobe and the relationship with Microsoft. Is what Adobe is able to do related to experience something that you want to see Microsoft sort of hook onto even more closely in that relationship, or
I mean, if I were Microsoft, I would. Microsoft, if you remember, their messaging, over the last couple of years has been around intelligent customer engagement.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a kind of consistent theme, and they've to their credit, they put the messaging in the right place. Right now, are they a full engagement platform yet? No. They're getting there, though. I mean, if you look at things like what they've done with one of my favorite new pieces of the Microsoft platform is AI for sales, which Dina Apostolou and others are working on. They're getting there. I mean, they are getting there. They're not. That said, there is some benefit to working closer with Adobe on the idea of experiential marketing, and Adobe's gotten it down right. I mean, they got it right. And and Microsoft and Adobe's partnership, I don't know if you've seen what I've been calling it publicly. I call it the GARP, right? The GARP, which is the Get a Room partnership, because it's so intimate. It's like almost makes me blush to watch it, right? So, the thing is that it's such a close partnership that it's not like Microsoft is losing face by letting Adobe work with them to do it. It's not that kind of thing. It's the partnership benefits both. So should Microsoft tie themselves closer? Yeah, they should. But with that said, they should not lose the theme that they are on, which is the intelligent customer engagement theme. That they should keep that thematically focused for their for at least Dynamics, and really for the company as a whole, but sure. Dynamics in particular.
Sticking with that relationship, I'm trying to think offhand here. I can't think. Can you think of any specific sort of big customer successes, not just wins, but like customer successes that have come out of that integrated set of solutions between the two companies?
The answer is I know of some, but they're kind of NDA.
Okay.
So let's say this. There are successful deals that have occurred that are the result of the partnership, not just the one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm just talking off the top of my head. I think I've seen now that I say it, one or two that have been demoed at keynote addresses. I'm just blanking on them off the top of my head, but
well, there was one they pushed that I don't, for the sake of it, for some reason I don't remember it either. But was more of the ODI thing. That it was a demo. It wasn't a demo. It was a discussion about.
Yeah, that might have been. Was it Unilever? Maybe
one of the companies that started with the UNI. I think
yeah,
Unilever, Unisys. I don't remember one of them, but it was a demo of interoperability between the Microsoft Adobe and SAP
Yeah.
data, and which is what ODI is really all about. So, and it was their first public customer for that.
Right. Probably a good one to co-invest with them or stick with them on
Yeah,
that
it
one.
was, whatever one it was a huge company, and I don't know why I'm blocking it. I want to
Yeah.
say it was Unilever or something like that.
Yeah,
But
I think it was.
yeah,
I think that was at Inspire in July.
I saw it at the analyst summit that they did.
Okay. Yeah, I want to say even going back further, they have showcased some maybe another customer or two at other big events in previous years about more specifically the Adobe D365 sort of integration. But okay. I mean, be that as it may, it's good to know that you've seen some of those and that they are out there because they're not. I don't hear too often about them. I suspect, like you said, they're just often kept a little more quiet. Okay, so I guess another just this kind of one more perspective on Commonwealth of Self-Interest and sort of what's different about that. That was one of the things I was thinking about. Like what else is it the technology that's evolved to enable people to think more about or enable maybe you to push organizations to go much deeper like this about their customers' experiences and how they engage, as opposed to investing in a CRM and trying to, because obviously it's about more than just a core CRM to really to realize some of these these ideals, I guess you would say, or really outcomes that really match what you're envisioning.
No, the answer is sort of yes and sort of no. I mean, it's more than just the technology is there to handle it, but that's not the reason that companies are thinking more about it. The reason companies are thinking more about it is just the customers are who the customers are. They're considerably more demanding than they were, even 5 years ago. What's happened since we had the communications revolution of about, I want to say maybe let's call it about almost 15 years now, is that the customers have gotten increasingly empowered because their initial empowerment worked so well. In other words, once they changed how they were demanding things, because their expectations had changed dramatically with the transformation of communication. With mobile being 24/7 really, and in effect, you're basically carrying a computer with multiple services that you're accessing, every second of the day with serious power, and you're accessing the mostly communication services. It could be Skype, it could be Twitter, it could be Instagram, it could be email, it could be Zoom, it could be anything really. I mean, it's an astonishing number of channels available, which are all being used, right? And because you had that power, the customer said, well, if I can communicate almost instantly with everyone, I want to do that with the companies I'm dealing with too. They should be communicating with the same speed I'm communicating with everyone else. And what I want from the companies, because they can get their product, now that we have, and this is actually a slightly different trigger, now that we have e-commerce, right? Now that I have Amazon, now I have things that are going to deliver in roughly the same amount of time it would take me to get to a store. And not only that, now that I have e-commerce as the middleman, meaning the mom and pop shop has the same ability to present their products and services as a large retailer does, and for roughly the same price. And now that I have courier services, which will get things there really quickly, then I can compete as a 4-person business with a 1-million-person business, so to speak, and get same prices when I'm as a customer looking for things. So therefore, they got to give me more than just a good price and the product I can get elsewhere. So the combination of the speed of communication and the expectation of that speed with the available data on the products and services and the availability of the playing field leveling somewhat, made it customer insanely demanding, like
Right.
demanding to the point of entitlement, right? And the result is, though, because it worked, meaning people got terrified of influencers and all these other things happen, right? They can even be more demanding. So they are. They're not stopping. There was a fascinating study done right at the beginning of the millennium, which was by Dr. V. Kumar and I can't remember his name of one of his assistants and it was in the Harvard Business Review. It was on the correlation of loyalty to profitability, and it said the correlation was weak to fair. And well, because everyone would think, oh, loyal customer, that's like massively profitable. No, it's not. You know why? For the exact reason we just were talking about. You got a highly demanding customer who also, because they are so demanding, also and is willing to stick with the company, are going to do one of two things. First, they're going to expect more from that company because they have been loyal. And two, is they know how to game the system, right? So, and they do. I mean, I do it. I'm a loyal customer at a lot of companies, but I do game the system, meaning I know what I want from them to keep me loyal, and I'll get it, right? And I'm not ashamed of it. I mean, I'm spending a lot of money with these companies, so but the profitability is down because of that entitled customer. So you're kind of in a conundrum, really, which is, well, does loyalty matter anymore? And then all of a sudden the measurements are changing because indirect impact on revenue now matters, meaning I influence your decision to buy something, even though I didn't buy it myself, but you did. Those kind of things are now important to companies to even understand, and the complexity is increased by multiples. So, you've got a lot of things kind of juggling. Technology, again, technology can handle a lot of that, but it didn't drive any of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the increasing entitlement and the success of the increasing success of that, let's call it expectation and entitlement, as it does succeed, the increasing expectation that is driving a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's such a different. That's a great point. I mean, it's such a different world in terms of what people expect from places they do business, that they're going to buy a thing or a service from, compared to, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. I mean, it's just completely different. And like I think you mentioned, the sense of entitlement. It's not that you think that's right, or that's where you think things should be. It's just where they are, and if you're doing business in this marketplace, that's where you have to meet people.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, there is one thing that's really important to this, though, and because the tendency of most companies is to then go and overpromise.
Okay.
And what they do is they'll say, and how many companies do you know that when I say this, you make this commitment all the time, at least claim to make it, which is you have to delight the customer all the time. And our policy as a company is to always delight our customers and always to exceed expectations. Do you know how ridiculous that actually is?
Yeah.
That is so stupid. First of all, you'll never, ever meet that promise, ever. You can't do it, because the whole definition of delight says you can't do that. Delight means doing something beyond what they expect, and then when it's done, they're not expecting it again, right? The minute they're expecting it again, it's no longer delight. Guess what? It's expectation, and the game is upped,
Yeah.
and it's more expensive, and it's harder, and it's like, make them super happy. Their expectation all the time, their expectation is that they're going to be super happy. Plus, it operates from a false premise, which is when we say we love a company as a customer, when we say we love a company, that we love them the same way we seem to love our spouse. We don't. It's a company, right? We don't love them. We're not in love with a company. We might really like working with this company to get what we want from it. But you know what? When I'm done with it, I'm not thinking about it immediately afterwards. I might write about a great experience because I'm professionally do, but as a customer, I'm not saying, whoa, that was so amazing. I got to tell the whole world. Now, that said, if somebody brings up that company, I can say, well, last time when I bought something, it was amazing what they did, blah, blah, blah. But the reality of this is what we want of a company is very simple. We want whatever it is we want to do with them done as quickly as we can get it done and as effectively. So what's the most singularly important thing you can do for a customer? Meet their expectations and make sure that it's convenient for them. That's it. Convenience. Convenience is the number one thing you got to pay attention to. We in our world, yours and mine, we call it frictionless and seamless, which is
Yeah, yeah,
buzzwords.
yeah.
But ultimately, it's convenience. It's like if I go to Amazon, I don't expect it to mess up. I expect to be able to go online, buy something, and get it in a day or two, right? Now, because I'm a Prime member and I'm paying for that privilege, right?
Right.
But Amazon says, all right, well, so the genius of Amazon was not the genius of an array of goods and services you can get all around the universe from all around the world. It's the logistics. The logistics are their genius. Their ability to deliver what you need easily and without much fuss and in a timely way. And the other thing is, for example, think of it this way. Occasionally, Amazon will exceed expectations. Occasionally, right? You'll say it'll be there in 2 days. It comes in one. Now, less and less now. That's coming. Now they're making a brand promise, if you're a Prime member, of one in as many places as they can. So the expectations are higher on Amazon, and it's been breaking at places now. I've seen Amazon start to break in different places, but on the whole, they meet the brand promise all the time, and the brand promise is one of convenience. We'll get it to you in the time that you want it in, right? And you won't have to do a whole lot. The other thing they do, which is really remarkable, and I think this people underestimate, they make it incredibly easy to return something. You want to return it? Click, 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 click. Here's your label. Go to a UPS store, have them come to you. The end. That's it. That's all it takes. That's convenience. That is the single most important thing you can do. You meet the expectation. That's it. You don't have to exceed it. You do that once in a while, which is the whole idea of exceeding, right? And then you meet it where it's at. You meet it right where it belongs.
Right, right.
Right.
And at the same time, I guess shielding the customer from all those inconvenient things that they really do have to do to make something like a return work. But
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We always talk about transparency. Actually, the best thing for me when it comes as a customer is opacity. I don't want to see anything that
right,
goes on behind the scenes. I just want to get what I'm doing done.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's reading a book like this. It reminded me a little bit of when I studied psychology in college, and you read psychology, and like you can't help you're reading it and you're kind of sort of observing it and thinking about it, but then you can't help but sort of put it into your own life, and
Yeah.
reading about customer experiences and decisions businesses are making. I mean, it does the same thing to me, and I
Yeah.
suspect a lot of people,
Yeah.
because I'm talking to business owners all the time. I have a business. I look at enterprise systems a lot. All these things are sort of rolling around as I'm reading it. I don't know if you get that feedback often, but that's
No, I do. I do. And it's kind of how I wrote it. I mean,
okay.
I a lot. If you'll note, I mean, I'm using things like the UPS store in the neighborhood down the block. The taxi driver who's also now a very close personal family friend. My dentist. I mean, they were all in the book. In addition to the big case studies that we all know and love from the work we always do, like the big companies who are doing it at scale. I'm looking at the individuals who are doing it incredibly well because they understand how to engage human beings at a very small scale, but at a one-to-one and a one-to-one level, but also something that does scale beyond what they do. And that, but it's out of my life. It's literally my neighborhood.
hmm
And, so yeah, I mean, a lot was written with that, but even look at it like, so here's an interesting, I was just thinking this while we were sitting and talking. So I really like coming on your show. I do. I like
Thank you.
you a lot. I always have. And I turn down a ton of these. I turn down, like, I get a request all the time. I'll never turn you down, ever. And the reason for it is because so you're theoretically, or let's even say it technically, you're covering the Microsoft world, the world, not only Microsoft, the Dynamics world, right? And if you were following your absolute name, you would be talking about Dynamics technology of one kind or another all the time, which you do. But when you look at the coverage you do, and you look at the conversations you have, aside from the fact you're an incredibly nice human being, they're all much more, how do I put it, human. They're not geeky. They're not for a tiny little slice of an audience that is heavily focused in a very small area. They're areas of interest that appeal to people, and in a good way, in the sense that even let's say the geekiest Dynamics MVP in the world is going to be thinking about things the way you just said, right? Applying it to their life, but it's also because of the way you do things. And not only that, when you cover things, when you're looking online at the actual, let's call it the newsletter editorially side of it, you cover it not as a Microsoft fanboy. You cover it as a person with an opinion, right?
And I appreciate that.
Right, and sometimes you're critical, and sometimes you're not, but it's fair. What you do is fair, and it's not only fair; it's also well written. I mean, and you cover areas that are not absolutely focused in on the technology of Dynamics, but could be focused on, let's say, the broader ecosystem, or even Microsoft at the corporate level, in terms of the vision and the mission. I mean, you cover the range you cover, given your mission as a organization, is both astounding and interestingly enough, it's appropriate. Meaning you're not going so wide that you're just out of sync with what you're actually doing. So, but I think about those things, and this is one of the reasons I'm not kidding. I will never turn you down on if you ever want me on the show, because I will be on it one way or the other, because I really like you and I really like it.
Oh, thanks. That really does mean a lot. And yeah, I know that you follow Microsoft very carefully too, and in seeing some of what you have thought about, and some of the conclusions you've reached about what companies need and what companies need to do, I see that in what Microsoft's done, and I suspect I know you've talked about this, that they've engaged you as a they've been your client, on and off, I guess, for years, right? And
with an occasional lapse, it's really rare.
oh, okay.
For about 15 years.
But yeah, you really see when I see some of their latest decisions on their product line. I mean, I hear your influence, and not just your influence, but I certainly hear see your influence in some of the ways they've thought about approaching new products. I mean, and you wrote about this. This is one of the other things I really wanted to touch on here was your newest. You do these CRM watch list series, I guess you would call them, of awards and recognition every year. And these are big pieces. You obviously spend a lot of time putting them together, evaluating a ton of companies, right? And Microsoft seems to make it. I know they're on it this year as not one of the two top winners, but as part of the watch list, as one of the big engines. And it's a lot to cover. I mean, we'll link to it, but it's a really long sort of evaluation of what you've seen. Are you? It sounds like you're generally pretty content with some of the direction that they've chosen and the vision that they've sort of embraced.
Without a doubt. I mean, look, they've had a lot of ups and downs in the last few years in the Dynamics pieces of it and the cloud pieces of it to some extent, but they're on and up right now in multiple places especially in Dynamics, and I know why. Well, let me back up. I mean, Satya, when he came in, presented a vision. At first, he didn't make it obvious, although I sussed it out and wrote about it, and it turned out to be pretty accurate, I think. Which was, he didn't just want to be software and services. He wanted to be an integral part of all 21st century business infrastructure. So and that changed everything at Microsoft. And you've seen it. The operating structure changed. Dynamics rolls up under cloud. Things like that.
Yeah.
Office became not just productivity suite, but became a unified communications hub that, of course, still retained its productivity, the capabilities for productivity, but became much more than just that. And of course, Azure became the everything, really. It became the infrastructure. And if you look at it from the big market standpoint, I mean, it led to partnerships with things like ServiceNow and Adobe and, and all these other companies who are now moving into Azure. For the most part, it's led, and I heard last week at Oracle Open World, Larry Ellison praising Microsoft to the skies.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, and really nice to hear Larry Ellison praise another company, and but deservedly so. And the Adobe partnership, of course, is staggering to me. It's a phenomenal partnership, and it's model for what a partnership at a strategic go-to-market level should look like. But that's because of Satya's decision, right, and the vision being, and then the mission and execution against, and that's trickled into everything that, well, it's not trickled into, it's driven into everything Microsoft's doing internally too. Again, the not just the reorg of the personnel, which is, to me, had mixed results, but more to the how, for example, dynamic CRM is what they're building, how they're engaging the marketplace. Do they have a lot of places to go? Yeah, there's still loads to go on. The messaging needs some, definite improvements, and well, let's say it needs extension. That's probably a better way to put it than improvement. It needs some tweaks, but it needs some extension. But the team there is starting to mature into the product, and the products are starting to mature, and they're aligned with the market as they are. And you got some whiz kids like Dina Apostolou and Hayden Stafford, and and the outreach side, you got people like Jen Douglas who are doing an amazing job, with AR on the AR side, and in other words, they got the right people in the right places doing the right things, and they're also aligned well with the market, and the partnerships are seriously strategic and being effective in their immediate scope and their potential, and with enormous potential for future scope. So, it's got a lot going very positively in multiple ways. And it's also because Microsoft's willing to recognize some shortcomings they had. Like, they did not have a year and a half, 2 years ago, they didn't have the marketing, the marketing suite they needed to be competitive. So they tied it to Adobe, which also gives them the time to build their own marketing suite, which will, compete in a different area than Adobe's is, right? So Adobe is part of the, it's part of the plan. I mean, it's literally, Dynamics CRM SF, sales and Dynamics CRM service and Adobe digital marketing. That's the three pillars, right? Really. So, it's a big commitment. But that's, again, Microsoft's willingness to say, well, look, we didn't have the strength we needed 2 years ago, so we partnered with a company that did. And of course, it doesn't hurt that Satya well, let's say close friends in high school,
Right?
Well, close friends. Shantu and Satya are like best buddies, so, or at least really good buddies, and so that helps. So Microsoft's on a very positive roll at the moment. Things do change, and then 6 months from now, I might be saying something different, but at the moment, I don't see that.
Okay. Just to maybe touch on a couple of the critiques that you did mention, or things that you'd like to see change further. One was, and I think you've talked about this, I think other analysts have too, for quite a while, which is e-commerce. They hadn't had any sort of platform. Now they actually have something, although it's not CRM. It's not tied into CRM directly. But is that would you like to see sort of full-blown e-commerce from Microsoft?
Well, let's put it this way: even if I wouldn't like to see it, they need it. Yeah. Ultimately, right now, look, it's not CRM, it's e-commerce. It's different,
Yeah.
but it's part of what you need to compete around engagement, and it's how transactions more often than not are being carried out. And and consequently, look, I mean, Adobe bought Magento,
Yeah.
and I thought at first maybe they would do something with that, but apparently not, and or at least not yet. Uh, you know, uh, Oracle bought ATG, but also has their own commerce cloud, which is, somewhat ATG based, but it's really, they built it, and it's really a big thing. It's an enterprise grade, cloud, and Salesforce, of course, bought Demandware and Cloud Craze, which give them B2B to, B2B, B2C, and B2B2C.
Mm-hmm.
And then, SAP bought the cream of the crop, which was Hybris, which was a lot on premise and now in the cloud fully. And, so everyone has it except Microsoft when it comes to really scale, enterprise grade e-commerce. And there's not much left to buy. I mean, out there's Shopify and a couple others, but they're all kind of focused on a smaller market than Microsoft has eyes on. It doesn't mean Microsoft doesn't have eyes on the small and medium business side, but it's not necessarily a purchase they want to make for that purpose. They can, in that purpose, they can use their partners if they want, like, Episerve, Episerve and companies like that
Yeah.
who do have it.
Right. And just this week they revealed the D365 Commerce, but
Right.
have you seen
I haven't
that
seen it, but I'm going to be up there in a couple weeks, so I'm pretty sure they'll show me.
Okay.
And I will be interested in seeing it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, my first take, and I don't know too much about it either, is that it's really, I mean, it's an extension of their previous product, Dynamics 365 for retail, which is like AX based, and I think it's only sort of all together. So there's e-commerce in that. It's based, but to me, the good news is based on Microsoft's own, e-commerce that they've built up for their own Microsoft e-commerce, through their own online store. So I think it's. I'll be interested to hear what you think of it when you get a better sense, because
I will absolutely make a point of it.
um,
Promise.
another one I just wanted to touch on here was LinkedIn and that acquisition. Sounds like you're generally bullish on, or think they've done the right things overall with buying LinkedIn, with how they've managed to keep it going pretty strong. It seems like, but you'd like to see some differences in how they manage the connection to Dynamics 365.
Well, more than that. I mean, they need to. LinkedIn was, look, I mean, let's face it, LinkedIn was pretty expensive. Right. And yet, when it comes to those things, I don't worry about that too much, because the reality is, the way I view acquisitions, even though I have all these people who spend all this time to discuss all these things about acquisition pricing and so on, from my standpoint, a company was willing to offer the amount, and the other company was willing to take it. Okay, so what more can you say?
Right.
If that's the case, then good for them. That said, if Microsoft's really going to get the most value out of LinkedIn, they have to do they have to do something that LinkedIn stopped doing several years ago, and that is open up the API again. Look, right now, I think I have never been and never will be, and I don't care what anyone says, a fan of Sales Navigator. I've always thought it was a piece of absolute crap.
Okay.
And I still think that. I don't think it's improved much with Microsoft's help. And then I look at their pricing. You see the pricing for dynamic sales, and there's one, I call it a SKU, but there's one set of prices where you buy sales, dynamic sales, and Sales Navigator for a percent per price per month per user. It's like you're buying theoretically 2 SFAs.
Right.
Now, no one in their right mind thinks anyone's buying an SFA with Sales Navigator. They're buying access to the fire hose that is LinkedIn. That's what they're buying. It's the only way they get it. That's why LinkedIn shut it down. It used to be open, and then they had they had a premium version, and then it was generally open, but they had a premium version that they gave access to for key companies. But then when Sales Navigator came around, they literally shut it down. I remember I was talking to the guy who ran it at the time, Sales Navigator. Actually, the guy who created it originally was an old friend of mine. And he was telling me that they were going to shut down. I said, that's the stupidest mistake you're ever going to make. And I still think it's the stupidest mistake that LinkedIn ever made. Because the reality is if and Microsoft needs to correct the mistake by opening up the API again. And yeah, if you want to do it as a premium version, do a premium version, but open it up. And the reason I say that is very simple. It aligns with Microsoft's vision. Microsoft's vision, if I'm right about it, and I've had internal confirmation from different people that I was, so, maybe they're wrong, but if I'm right about it, if Microsoft really wants to be a mission critical part of business infrastructure in the 21st century, then opening up that API is critical to that when it comes to data available, right? If they don't want to be that, then I'm wrong. They're people who told me that I was right are wrong, and Microsoft must be less than that, and consequently, then yeah, maybe not. But the reality is, look, it's still a good investment no matter what. I mean, LinkedIn is great, but if you really want to make $26 billion worth of investment, worth $26 billion, you open that API back up, you give people access to it again. You become you're a force when that happens. You become more of a force, right? Because you still own it, right? But you're providing it, and you're allowing people access to data. And if you want to, tiered pricing, do whatever you want, but get it open again and get rid of friggin' Sales Navigator. Just throw it out. I'll be happy to burn it publicly, right? So, well, I really don't like it. It's like I never liked it, and I've always thought it was kind of awful.
Yeah.
But that to me, it's an insult to dynamic sales, which I think is a really good product. And the AI for sales makes it an even better product, and I always thought it was really good. So, that's kind of my, let's call it my unabashed opinion.
Yeah, awesome. No, I appreciate that. You mentioned earlier, and I wanted to get back to it if we could, just if you have time, is the talk about customer data platforms, and you said you're not a fan of the term. Microsoft now has one too, Customer Insights, I believe it's called, and I pretty much understand what it is. It's not, customer data platforms. I feel like I'm maybe a little behind on the hype for them overall. But what are your concerns about the term or about what's being sold out there? And do you have anything in particular about Customer Insights from Microsoft?
I don't have anything particular about Customer Insights since I haven't actually seen it in action yet. Here's the thing. If you look at the original definition of CDP, it was basically marketing data. I'll call it, to really simplify it, and I am simplifying it, active marketing data, right? Meaning it was data that was specific to benefit marketing efforts, and it was active in the sense that it was being captured, parsed and taken care of and stored in kind of real time or close to it. And then it was constantly refreshing and updating, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. And then the definition got broadened to anything, not just marketing, and it's still active. Now, if you look at, historically, you look at CRM, it had a system of record, whose job was to store customer, mostly transactional, but later on, other forms of data. And it was done with data lakes and data warehouses and all these other things. And then it was done in the cloud, and so on and so forth. The difference between a CDP, what's called a CDP, and a system of record from CRM is just active versus passive. CRM was a lot more static. It became somewhat active later, but for the most part, it was a fairly static system of record. Now this is a much more active system of record, but it's still a system of record. It's not that distinct. It's not a unique thing that everyone needs to have one of, right? Now that said, the problem isn't that it exists as such, or that the category exists. The problem is everyone's claiming to have one, right? And what you look at what they have, and half the time it's either less than that. It's not that at all, or it's much more than that, and they're trying to stuff it into the CDP enclosure so that they could sell it. So, for example, two companies that luckily have avoided doing that, even though initially I think they were thinking about doing it, were Oracle and Salesforce. Salesforce announced Customer 360, and the tendency there was to say, oh, yes, CDP, it's not. And they say it's not. They say it's, bigger than a CDP. I'm not going to go through the details, but Oracle had CX Unity, and initially they were looking at it as a CDP, but when they announced it, it wasn't a CDP. It was a customer intelligence platform, much more than what a CDP is. And it is. I've seen CX Unity, and it's way more than a CDP is. Does way more. And so again, I'm not going to analyze it. I'm just why the let's call it the extent of my depth is it does way more, right? So, but I've seen it in some depth, and so they're getting off the bandwagon already. It's a bandwagon now, and bandwagons are always suspicious because the claims are rarely met. And the category itself, to me, is just evolutionary. It's not dramatic and new. And that said, I trust David Rabb. I love the guy, and I think he's brilliant. So I trust what he's done. But from my standpoint, and this is the only but, is that it's been an evolution of a CRM version of a system of record into something that's taking data and taking it actively and starting to, run what it needs to run on it while it's taking it, in a manner of speaking. I mean, there's constant activity going on in it. And again, I'm deliberately oversimplifying, but that is, to me, the difference. So I'm skeptical about the claims of CDP that everyone's making, and I'm not entirely skeptical about the category. I'm just, when you're broadening the definition outside of marketing, then it's it's a different version of a system of record.
Okay. How are we doing for time here?
I've got a cut in about 5 minutes, maybe.
Okay. I guess maybe I have time for one more question, and this was something I would love to hear your perspective on in the kind of broader Microsoft strategic space, which is, you talked about Adobe. The other one that seems to be sort of triangulating with Adobe and Microsoft is ServiceNow. Where do you see those sort of three relationships heading? The ServiceNow one, it's not a company I know a ton about, but I saw the recent announcement with Microsoft. It seems really overlapping with where Microsoft wants to take Flow and Logic Apps, maybe.
The answer is yes and no. So just once again, ServiceNow is also my client, right? So just so you're aware of that. So and again, remarkable company, different way though. So ServiceNow, the best way to understand them as a company is that they're actually historically and currently, they're highly specifically focused. Historically, they came in the world through ITSM, meaning IT service management. So basically, they handled all the let's call it all the cases, all the actions that IT departments had to handle in larger, enterprise scale companies. They were wildly successful. They're a multi-billion-dollar company, and that is their backbone. About 4 years ago, maybe it might be even a little longer now. They moved to they didn't move to. They added what they call customer service management, CSM. But what they don't call it customer service management. They call it customer service management, meaning they're the operational action, actions and operations in customer service, which is similar to ITSM really in a lot of ways, because you're opening cases, you're solving problems, you're handling action, you're handling interactions, things like that, and they're expert at that. And the biggest and fastest growing component of their business is CSM. The way that manifests is the person who drove the ITSM business, Taylor Farrell Huff, she was moved to customer service management to drive it as a primary business, which was a combination of a political statement inside the company, because she was the one who drove ITSM. So they're saying, this is how important it is to us. And two, is she's really capable of doing the job, right? She's very, very good. So the Microsoft announcement was actually focused around specific verticals, if I remember correctly, right? It was seen as a bigger opening. But again, so Microsoft does customer service management. So they'll do self-service, knowledge bases, all that. What ServiceNow does best is highly complex service operations, which Microsoft doesn't do as much of, right? So the combination gives them the gamut of, let's call it prime work from service to customer and service to company, right? So ServiceNow is service to company, Microsoft is service to customer. That said, I do believe, and I'm doing this off of memory of a discussion I had at ServiceNow's conference a couple months ago. So I may be slightly faulty on this. So again, this is from a discussion, not from reading the press releases or anything like that, or talking to anyone else about it. That is highly specifically focused around one or two particular verticals for now, but they both see, Microsoft and ServiceNow, much greater synergies in much larger ways down the road.
Okay.
But ServiceNow is a good partner. I mean, for a lot of these companies, Oracle has a partnership with ServiceNow. Microsoft has a partnership with Oracle. Oracle, right now, this is Adobe, Oracle, and Microsoft and ServiceNow. Those four companies are kind of all starting to cohere, and then SAP is coming in through ODI. What's interesting is it's basically everyone but Salesforce.
Right.
what it is, right? And that's kind of the positive about it is it's signaling an era of some real co-opetition,
right?
Which I'm very happy about. That's my way of doing things. But and I'm seeing it actually start to formulate when they're realizing, to meet the needs of contemporary customers from an end-to-end standpoint, each of us can't do the whole thing. So we're going to have to ally with companies we historically even competed with in order to get the whole thing done. But the part I'm concerned about is that no one's inviting Salesforce to the.
Yeah, has no one dangled sort of an invitation to become compliant or with ODI, for example? Has that not been dangled out to Salesforce?
I dangled the invitation.
Oh, maybe that was you. Okay.
No, I did that. I actually dangled it publicly. I said, well, if ODI is not a move against Salesforce, then invite Salesforce.
Okay, yeah,
but
okay.
That said, now even on ODI, I mean, is it a move against Salesforce? Even they say no, but yeah, of course it is to some extent. On the other hand, the thing I like about ODI is that they've decided to keep the scope where it belongs right now, which is interoperability among the three companies that are involved in it, rather than try to create a standard. Originally, I thought they would move to create a standard, which is why I would have said invite Salesforce in, right? Because if you're going to create a standard for data, then you need to have companies like Salesforce and not SAP, Microsoft, Salesforce, Oracle, all need to be part of that.
Yeah. I thought it was a standard.
No,
okay.
What they're doing, if you're doing a real standard, a broad data standard that will apply to every company theoretically that adopts it, you have to have government agencies involved. It's a whole other world. What they have told me in conversations, multiple ones, they're developing interoperability among the three of them. They're not moving to a standard, at least not now.
Okay.
I know what it takes to get to a standard. Okay, I'm not saying I'm an expert in data. I don't claim to be, and I don't think I am. I don't even think I'm an expert in standards. However, I've had enough experience with companies that are building standards to know what you need to do. They are not doing those things, right? And the big one, by the way, is the involvement of things like NIST, in the actual effort from the get-go. Right, and then other government agencies have to come in, and then it's a whole other level of work. I applaud the effort for interoperability, and I applaud them for the fact that they haven't publicly claimed that they are going for a standard. Will they eventually go for a standard? They may. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I can speak to the fact that right now that's not what they're doing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Well, Paul, thank you so much. It's been fun. I mean, I could, I could throw a bunch
I
more
know.
questions at you. I know you get. I appreciate you carving out all this time for me to talk with you here.
I said, man, anytime for you.
Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. We'll put a link out. The Commonwealth of Self-Interest: Business Success Through Customer Engagement. And yeah, I hope we talk again soon. I hope I see you on the road somewhere. Not too long.
Well, I imagine I'll be at some Microsoft conference soon enough.
Right.
So will you. So I know we'll see. If you're ever in the DC area, let me know, and we'll go to dinner.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to Paul Greenberg for joining once again. If you want to get in touch, please send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.